Since you asked about the gamification piece, there's always this thing that comes up that I get asked about a lot. And it's kind of similar to what we were talking about before. Once you reach a certain level, what motivates you to continue? So what we ended up doing in this experience is we expire points after a year. So you can't actually keep your level unless you continue to do things. It's kind of like this CPE credit idea. To maintain your level, you have to do things.
Welcome to the Elephant in AppSec, the podcast to explore, challenge, and boldly face the AppSec elephants in the room. I'm Alexandra, your host, joined by my amazing co-host Tristan, a former security engineer and co-founder of Escape. Today, we're excited to have an amazing guest, Dustin Lehr, joining us. Dustin is an accomplished software engineer turned information security leader, currently serving as a senior director of platform security at Fivetran. He possesses an enormous wealth of experience in application security and is a strong community leader, organizing meetups like Let's Talk Software Security, where everyone passionate about this topic can join for an open discussion. Dustin is also the author of the Security Champion Program Success Guide, a valuable resource for organizations and individuals passionate about security and looking to build or improve their Security Champion program. He's a strong advocate for its benefits, so we decided to challenge him on whether his program is actually useful. Dive right in to find out the results. So, hi Dustin, I'm very excited to finally have you with us today. And it's been a long time since I wanted to have you as a guest, on our podcast. And the topic is also exciting, I think, for both for developers and for the security people. You come from the development background, and then you transitioned into the security several years ago, and now you're kind of advocating for actually developing security champions within the organization. You also wrote the Security Champion handbook for for everyone to actually share with everyone your knowledge. And I think the question that I have is actually what motivated you, in the first place to write it and to actually spend so much time on it and investment, share it with everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, it's great to hear. I've been looking forward to this as well. And yeah, to get to your question, what motivated me to write the Security Champion Success Guide was really from spending a lot of time helping to set up security champion programs within companies and sort of teams for that has brought a lot of learning. A lot of mistakes were made, okay? To the point that, the learnings from those mistakes, I really just wanted to share quickly to avoid those pitfalls, but also to give some more clear guidance. Like one thing that I noticed going through my journey in programs is there wasn't a lot of very sort of specific advice, like do's and don'ts, and so on, building these programs, and noticed that gap. Really wanted to fill that gap and help as many people, go through a journey and be successful with setting up security champion programs as possible. So those are the reasons.
So it was organic in a way, like you discovered the gap like by practicing, and you decided to help other people fill this gap.
To a degree, yeah. And I think in general, I take a pretty methodical approach with what I do. It's not randomness. It's very intentional trials and errors. And so each of those were sort of stepping stones to more clear understanding of what to do and what not to do. And I couldn't keep that to myself. It's kind of one of those things where if you have found things that work, you can't help but want to share it with other people, to help them in their own journey.
And what are the experiences, like negative experience where you thought, okay, I would actually have needed this guide, for myself when I was like before that?
Yeah, you want a specific example?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course.
Share,
of course.
Happy to share.
No pressure.
There are a lot, they're trickled throughout the guide, throughout the whole thing. But a few pop into mind as you start talking about that. I think one is volunteer versus voluntold. So really allowing people who are actually interested to volunteer and be part program as opposed to mandating it. And that was something I had to find out the hard way. We really did try to assign people the role to begin with. And it since we didn't naturally sort of organically find the people who were interested, the people that we chose weren't necessarily interested. So their engagement and participation was a lot lower than other people who asked about it. Like there were people who heard about the program and they asked to be part of it, and then they're the active ones. So that to me, screams pretty loudly that it, for the most part, needs to be more of a volunteer type program, right? So that's one learning that sticks out. Another one is providing room for variation of content. So there's a lot of very technical focus when it comes to security champion programs. In a lot of cases, they're very focused on like AppSec programs and developers and that sort of stuff. But one thing I learned is as the AppSec focused security champion program grew, in one of my experiences, other people who may not be as technical started to want to get involved. Okay, so what are you going to do? Turn them away? Like, oh, you want to learn more about security? Sorry, you're not, you don't have the right title or something. It's like, no, please come join. Like, we're just happy that you're interested in this fascinating field of cybersecurity. Please join. But then what happened was all the content was tailored to technical people. So we had to kind of shift that a little bit and think about, well, how do we share more awareness topics? How do we share more things that might be interested to employees as a whole, no matter what the title is? So that was another pretty major learning.
Did you mention any trends among this like non-technical people? Were there mainly like specific departments that were really interested, or was it like completely random?
Yeah, totally across the board. I mean, I have seen and I've set up kind of these level type gamification systems up in the past as well, where it's like a belt system where people can kind of earn status as they go through the program. So people get to like black belt who are from marketing, finance, even like teams that deal with more of the customer side, like sales folks and IT people. They could come out from anywhere, and I think it just shows like a variation of the interests of people as a whole. You might find people who are interested in cybersecurity no matter what position they're in.
And if you would have to define, a security champion, how would you like define, very shortly to actually let people of different levels and experience, maybe there are some, developers that are listening to us. What do they do within the organizations? Like, how do they contribute?
Yeah, no, I think, let me just say that I think every security champion program is slightly different. There's a cultural element here that needs to be taken into account. But in general, the concept is really about finding allies across the organization who are interested in cybersecurity, who want to learn more, and who can become advocates or champions for the concept of security for their own teams. So there's a little bit of a liaison concept where we've got like the security professionals who do this for a living. We've got the development teams or whoever else across the company that we sort of want to reach. And then that champion is the person in the middle, who's kind of that bridge between security and their own team. And there's a lot of advantages in terms of having that security champion identified because they're familiar now with both sides. Imagine a security team who's trying to reach all the teams in their organization with some sort of security awareness message, or then development teams with a specific engineering message, whatever that is. They don't understand how all those teams work, and they can't understand it. Okay. Because imagine the scale of doing that. Like changing my message, no matter who I meet with, would be an astronomical task. So instead, we rely on champions to do that translation. Right? They know their team. They know their norms of their team. They also know the message we're trying to get out. So they can tailor and sort of filter that message best for their team. And that's where I think these programs become invaluable.
And do you think they're living up, to their promises all the time? Or there should be, organizational culture firstly in place or at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends.
Okay.
That's the experienced answer in general, right? I think it depends on a lot of things. I think it depends on whether the culture was taken into account. I think it depends on certain learnings that I've shared in the guide. Has this been a voluntold program versus a volunteer program? You know, are there budgets? Are there actually people dedicated to making this succeed, or is this just sort of this afterthought? You know, where I don't know, we've got an engineer that does this for 2 hours a month type of thing. Like,
Yeah.
so the success of the program really depends on the priority of it, the focus that's and the resources that have been able to report it. And then what I would say is, how much thought has been put into it too. Is this just, we don't have enough security people to scale. Can we get other people to like do our job for us and make it about us? Or is it about making it about the champions and the stuff that they learn and sort of encouraging them to get involved? So there's kind of right ways to go about it and wrong ways. And I would even say the programs that are struggling should probably step back and really take a look at, what are their motivations? What's the purpose of the program? What are the goals that they're trying to achieve? And these are things not a lot of people even step back to define to begin with. I've talked to a lot of people about security champion programs, as you can imagine.
Of course.
A lot of them are, hey, we just kind of heard we needed one, so we just kind of made one, but we don't really know why.
Yeah.
And that's obviously going to start to create issues.
And how do you create volunteers? I mean, is there a way, for instance, to advocate security among the developers and maximize the chances of some of them getting really genuinely interested into security and wanting after voluntarily become themselves security champions? Is there a technique?
100%. Well, so the way that I always describe it is to start small and find your allies. There's this concept of diffusion of innovation. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it's essentially a bell curve, and it describes how either products or culture change is adopted across an organization. You don't just go after the masses. Okay, what you do is you find people who are naturally interested in what you're selling or what you're trying to influence, and you work with them closely so that they start to become advocates and start to spread the word. And eventually you're going to reach what they call laggards, who are people who maybe initially resisted the entire idea because they see that it catches on. Okay, so a good example I always use is for smartphones. Like, think of the way that those caught on, right? And I personally, I was a flip phone person at the time that everyone was lined up at the Apple store because it works. I need to make calls. I flip it open and I do my thing. What's the problem? But you've got people lined up at the Apple store. Sorry.
What made you switch?
Well, yeah. Let me get there. I think what happened was, you had the initial people, the early adopters, lined up at the Apple store to get the first ones, and then the rest of us were kind of just watching. Right? We're not going to go get the first ones. We're going to be like, is this really a thing? Is this going to work? Okay. And then we see people enjoying their smartphones, getting benefit from those smartphones. And then over time, the majority of people end up getting a smartphone because they're like, look, there is value, right? So even those laggards like me, who were initially suspicious of it, I hate to admit that because I have one now and they're awesome. As everybody knows, but you can kind of see how that caught on. I would say it's the exact same thing for security adoption in a culture. You got to find those initial people, but you're going to have naysayers. You're going to have people who are laggards who look at this whole concept and say, that's not for me. Okay, so case in point, if I may share, this is a real thing that happened. Okay, when I had first at a previous company, when I had first started to communicate this concept of security champions, I had a manager who I told about this concept, and they straight up said, no, thanks, that's not for me. That makes no sense. That's a waste of my time. Leave me alone. I was like, okay, no big deal. I'm not going to push it because I wanted to kind of do more of a volunteer type system anyway. But I let other people start to get involved, right? And the whole thing grew to the point that this manager, and maybe they will listen to this podcast someday, and if they do, awesome. This manager actually signed up himself to be a security champion because he saw the benefit through others in the same way that I eventually bought a smartphone because I saw the benefit from others. Right. So that's how you kind of create that movement and culture change across your.
And will it last, this movement, or is it like a trend? Because I was talking with someone for another project in the podcast, and he was telling me, yeah, the problem that I have with the Security Champions program is that when you start it, it works very well, and people want to be involved, but over 1 year, 2 years, people start, like not being as involved as they should in the long run. So is it like because there is this specific case, or are there like techniques to maintain involvement in the Security Champions program?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think what I would start with to answer that is that it takes care and feeding, constant care and feeding.
Constant
It
care,
also
constant care.
takes, in my mind, a emphasis on understanding the motivations of folks. So I've spent a lot of time now studying behavioral science and psychology and all that in order to help run programs like this.
Yeah.
And what you find if you dissect the scenario that you're saying is people are initially motivated by things like curiosity, right? They're curious about the program. Like I typically see a lot of attendance in like the first couple of champion meetings because they're just curious, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't find other ways to motivate them, then their curiosity eventually drops off, and you have to replace that motivation with something else and try to find ways to provide value to them consistently over time. That could also mean changing some things. That could mean, like I was talking about earlier, having systems that sort of reinforce activities that people are doing, like a level type system. So an example, let me share a practical example to help with this as well. In the past, I have implemented these belt systems, like I mentioned. What do the highest level people get, right? So, let's say they earn a black belt and they're the highest level at this point. Well, why would they continue really to do anything? Because they have reached the highest level at that point. They've sort of accomplished, everything that was available to become a champion. At that point, I actually switch the motivation a little bit. And I say, okay, now that you're a black belt, you get to actually be part of helping us tweak and modify the program itself. You get invited to the steering committee. Your ideas are now accepted and applied to the program in general. So that switched the motivation from curiosity to development and accomplishment to now contributing, almost power, right? Or applying creative freedom to the program itself. And that really keeps people engaged. So you have to kind of think about that throughout the life of the program.
Yeah, definitely. And so that was one example of like a reason why a Security Champions program like would not work in the long run. But do you have like other reasons? Do you know like what are the top reasons why a Security Champions program is not working as expected, or is not giving as much in return as the company invested?
Yeah, I've shared a few examples before. I think, how you kind of go about building the champion program is very important, whether it's
obviously.
volunteer, full type system. In terms of value, I think that you need to provide value. I think it's all about the approach that you're taking, right? Like, are you providing value to the champions? Are they learning things? Are they starting to increase their own awareness of security? Are you encouraging that they share those things with their teams so that their teams can now see it? And has this now started to spread throughout the culture because you're doing it correctly? You're sort of doing the diffusion of innovation correctly. right now. There are ways, the smartphone or some, other ideas have flopped, even though there were early adopters, because they couldn't reach the majority over, within a reasonable amount of time. And I think the same thing can easily happen to any sort of culture change type of activity, including security champion programs. And yeah, there's a lot of reasons for it. And I think it really has to do with understanding your culture, understanding the type of people that you're trying to reach, and then designing a program that's really tailored to your program and adjusting accordingly. This care and feeding that we were just talking about is necessary. Are you putting adequate resources and time and money into running this program? Can you show an ROI, which is probably another angle that we should talk about. But I think at least initially that should answer your question.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that.
I actually have a question about, that gamification experience with Black Belt that you mentioned. Was it like test and learn approach, or like how did you come up with it, and what are actually, steps along the way that you put in place?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this is all kind of in the guide that we were talking about earlier, but a big thing that we did is really clearly define what are the specific actions that we want champions to do. Do we want them to show up to the meetings? Do we want them to speak up? Do we want them to share content? Do we want them to share what they learn with their teams? What about take extra training, complete training on time? So, fix issues, triage issues, like really listing those things out. And then what we ended up doing was assigning point values to those. So the things that take more effort and so on are obviously worth more points than things that are a little bit easier to do. And then we basically built that belt level system to if you have a certain number of points, you gain a level all the way out through black belt. Now, that's something that worked really well in that culture. I've seen other cultures work on something that's more like requirements driven. Like, sure, you can do all these optional things, but to get to a certain level, you have to do this specific thing. You have to be part of a bug bounty remediation effort, or something like that. And then that is what earns belt levels. Since you asked about the gamification piece, there's always this thing that comes up that I get asked about a lot. And it's kind of similar to what we were talking about before. Once you reach a certain level, what motivates you to continue? So what we ended up doing in this experience is we expire points after a year. So you can't actually keep your level unless you continue to do things. It's kind of like the CPE credit idea, to maintain your level, you have to do things. Okay,
this is a very clever trick.
But there's another thing to this, and that's okay, let's say your points expire and you drop a level. That's kind of demotivating, don't you think?
Yeah.
Like, I was black belt, now I'm brown belt, and I'm just like falling. Forget this program. Why am I even involved in this? Forget it. So what we ended up doing is we gave you double points if you were below your highest level, so you could catch back up. Right? So since you already reached that high level, you have to do exactly half of the things that you did to get back up to that. And that was something that was pretty successful too, in terms of motivation.
And was it all public? Like, for example, the whole company, could consult what person has black belt, person has brown belt, or was it more like personal, achievement? Was there any competition?
Yeah. So it's not a direct competition, only because I would say multiple people can be at the same level. It wasn't one of those, there can be only one black belt, which would be a very clear competitive type thing. However, there was sort of this social competition or at least social proof, where other people would see, hey, this person is leveling up and they're getting a bunch of recognition to answer your question. It was a very public thing when people are leveling up that we would share with others, even in all hands. We would say, hey, here are the new black belts, that are doing a fantastic job in security. Here's some of the things that they're doing. And other people see that and they say, oh, that's cool. And we get a lot of people signing up for the program and that sort of stuff when we see those types of results. Now, down leveling was more of a private thing. We're not going to say, hey, everyone, this black belt is now a white belt, because that's not okay, right?
Yeah.
So we would just kind of ping them in the background and say, hey, anything we can do to help? We realize this is a volunteer program. We've just noticed you're not as involved. How can we, what can we do better? That sort of stuff. And I think that's important too. And that's positive reinforcement versus negative. It's not like we're shaming people who are not moving as quickly. We're highlighting people who are doing really well. And I personally think that that's the right way to go about it.
And at the beginning, when you were kind of still developing it, was there a moment where you questioned, am I going in the right direction? Is the effort that you're doing, the effort to develop the program, to write the guide, to everything, is it worth it?
Compared to all the other things that I have to do every day, yeah, sure. I'm sure I asked that question a lot.
Skiing, for example.
Yeah, skiing. Yeah, playing guitar or doing something. Yeah, I mean, I did, but I think ultimately it's one of those things where, since I've seen these programs work so well, I just can't keep quiet about it. And I really started to post more on social media and all that stuff just to help people be aware that these things can work. And that if you're methodical about it, like we were talking about, you can make them work. I would stand today and say that you can make any company have a successful security champion program if you do it right. Now, that doesn't mean you can take this program from this company and just drop it into this company. That's not what it means. And that's why I kind of wrote the guide the way I did. And that's, you need to think about your company and your culture specifically and tailor your program to it.
And if we take a bit more, I would say a hands-on approach on that, what would be specifically the kind of security issues or security incident that having security champions inside of, for instance, every team, every engineering team would avoid or would make your organization more resilient against?
Are you saying sort of commonly across the board? What would you expect the champions to...
what is the what are the kind of security issues that the security champions are likely to mitigate by their presence and by them advocating security to their peers and the other engineers?
Yeah, certainly. I think a big focus, and this is kind of a big focus in AppSec in general, and that's preventative measures. So one thing that we typically push through these types of programs, that's kind of more on the left side, is things like shifting your SDLC process to take security into account, making sure that there are code reviews that security focused, or making sure that your QE test cases take security into account, these sorts of things. And then even on the right side, which is a little bit more to production, we get champions help with things like reporting issues. So we reward that as well. Like if somebody sees something, say something. It's the phrase. But if they notice something that doesn't really align with all the things they've been learning, I'm not sure we should be sharing files in this way. This is too publicly accessible. Then we reward people that come back to us and tell us that. And then we go push that up. There was one specific case too that's coming to mind where we had a customer support security champion lead an initiative to write security best practices for their customer support organization.
Okay.
So they came back to us and they're like, we don't really have any best practices. I'm just going to write one. Can you help us? And we were like, sure. Can you help me? And we said, sure. So we helped them refine that, but it was all them that wrote that. And that's the kind of stuff I just love to see, because we didn't have to ask them to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Like they saw it, they took the initiative, they did the heavy lifting.
That's impressive,
That's
and I'm
amazing.
sure that many security professionals are dreaming of having this kind of situation with people from their organizations that are not really like dedicated to security in the first place.
Yeah,
If
I've
they
got
come
other
to you,
examples.
yeah,
It's amazing. I've got other
yeah,
examples too, and this is why I can't shut up about it. Okay, because when you start to
Please.
see these things, you're like, wait, what just happened?
yeah,
So these are two examples that I'll share that are black belts. Okay, two black belts. One black belt started a security focus group. Okay, of their own accord, and they were meeting every 2 weeks. And what was happening is they were round robining in their little group, reading an article, summarizing an article, and then talking about it.
okay,
They're all non-security people, and they're meeting every other week, and they're talking about security. What is happening right now? That's amazing, right? Could you imagine a CISO or some security person mandating that? Hey, I want you to go start a security focus group, and like no one's going to do that,
no,
right?
No.
So when you see this stuff happening, it's like it's because you've reinforced that and rewarded it to the point that they felt inspired to do
yeah,
so. The other example is a black belt who started a book club. And literally, this is happening today. I am just a member of the book club. Like, I read the book and I show up to the book review that happens every other month, just like everybody else. And this person runs the entire thing front to back, non-security person, putting out surveys to pick the book, running the book review meeting, like the whole thing.
Are those
Again,
books?
could you imagine a CISO saying, "Hey, you from this, this sales org, can you start a book club for us?" Like, it's not going to happen unless you
It's
find
not.
people who just are
It's not.
inspired to do it.
Are those books cybersecurity related?
They are cybersecurity related, 100%.
Ah,
Yeah, cybersecurity book club.
incredible.
So-
I think that's very rare.
Yeah,
Because I heard about like book clubs within organizations, but cybersecurity book club, I think it's the first time I ever heard of.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It wasn't even an idea that had occurred to me at the time. It was all their own accord.
And do you know
I
why?
didn't say, "Hey, what do you think about doing a book club?" I didn't do any of that. It was them coming up with the idea and then running with it. So,
and speaking about the general perception of the Security Champions program, how do you see this evolving over time? I mean, you've been in the space for quite a long time now. How do you see it evolving? Do you see more and more people wanting to join such programs, or more and more CISOs and security professionals wanting to organize it? Do you think it would be everyone will have a security champion program? Every company that has a security program will have a security champion program in the future?
I do. I think we're headed there. And I think
Okay.
it's because we've seen enough success. It's kind of diffusion of innovation. It's the same
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like, we've seen the early adopters, even sliding into the early majority, I would say, where
Yeah.
a lot of people
Yeah.
do have programs like this today,
Yeah.
to the point that it's going to catch on. So I do predict that this will be just one of those essential pieces of any security program, whether it's AppSec focused or not. Like we talked about having more of a security focus. I think a lot of security security certificates programs, so it's basically the same thing. So I could see why you have AppSec team that this is going to just continue to grow. I see that because, again, you can't put this back in your response. Like, you can't just have success stories like I just shared and then just have, what that's going to do is it's going to spread and people are going to want to
And what's needed? I mean, not from a reputational point of view, because obviously everyone starts to speak about security champions now. The discipline is getting a good reputation. This is what you're saying, with the adopters, and it's becoming mainstream. But what do we need? Is there a lack of training? Is there a lack of experienced people that have already run this kind of program? What do we need to spread this practice among companies?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think think what we need to do to see is people thinking a little more who's part of their security. Because to reach people in this way takes skills that I think a lot of more traditional or just old school OG type of programs, they don't take that stuff into account. So as an example, maybe some of the older mindsets are just around technical people. I just need a bunch of application security architects or security architects who are going to go around and help people with the technical side. And if that's the entirety of your team, you're going to have trouble with things like community building and reaching out to people. You know what I mean? I'm just talking in stereotypes here. I'm sure there are plenty of engineers who have social skills too. But for security teams to start emphasizing skill sets like marketing, like sales, like relationship building, and community building, then I think these types of programs are going to start to be more successful. And I think we're seeing that we need that. It's not about just come to me if you have a technical issue. I'm just going to sit in my ivory tower and just ask me questions that are technical. No, like we need to go reach out and be proactive and build relationships and build connections. And that takes a little bit of a different skill set. And I think that we're shifting more toward that. And that's where I think it's going to be easier to create these champion programs as well.
Well, I'm glad that this is gaining more traction because I mean, it makes our life easier as security professionals, right? If everyone cares about security, and I can say, like, I can speak about this also from a vendor point of view. Like, when I'm talking about security tools and security products, like recently the developers started to be stakeholders of this because they started to get more and more involved in the security process and they care more about it. So they want to try the tools, they want to implement things, they want to like create secure code and create secure applications from the beginning, which is like something new, right? Because before they didn't care that much about the security.
Yeah, apart from some exceptions.
Apart from exceptions, but like it's generally when developers started caring about security, they ended up security engineers after a while. They switched their hats and they started like a security career.
Yeah, it's amazing to see. I agree. I think that we're headed toward that, where you have people just incorporating security concepts as part of their jobs. And that's kind of the vision. Like that's what gets people like excited because you don't really go back from that either. Like you've kind of been enlightened in terms of how security best practices actually improves you as a developer as a whole, and you want to share that with other people. And it's good to hear that I'm seeing the same thing, that people are kind of adopting these concepts more and more. It's becoming a little bit more widespread.
Yeah.
Now, I do think there are some foundational sort of institutional things that we need to do a little bit better as an industry, and that's things like educate people earlier. Like when they're learning to code, there should be something in there about the security implications of what they're coding too, and we're not there yet, and I really want to see us go there. Like I remember back in the day when I was in school, there was literally a single optional class when I was studying computer science to learn about security. And that was it, right? Yeah. Whereas what I'd like to see, especially in formalized, education, is an emphasis in every single class on security. Here's how to code. Make sure you take, the input validation into account as you're doing this, because otherwise that's a security implication. So we have a long way to go there, but when we get there, then I think we'll see a pretty major shift in mindset.
And speaking about education, do you have like an advice for the young security professionals that are listening to us on the podcast, and also a book that you recommend? You spoke about books before, like a book that you recommend that everyone should read in the security space.
Yeah. Geez, I'm gonna have trouble choosing a specific book. So let me work on that in the background while I answer your first question.
Of course.
I mean,
Go ahead.
5 books are also fine.
I'll just start throwing. I'll start throwing some books out there. And what's your first question? Was around
the advice for young security professionals.
Advice for So I think it's important, especially. I think you need to get involved in the technical details of what you're pushing for. Like, I met a handful of security professionals who are very familiar with kind of the high level concepts of what they're pushing, and then when they go talk to people about changing or shifting the culture toward being more security focused, they don't have the technical foundational knowledge in order to properly influence people. And here's why I say that. Like, I was a developer for over a decade myself.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a club. Like, if you can't show that you are technically proficient, you're not in the club. There's like this line. I don't like it, but there is a line between, are you technical or are you not technical? You know what I mean? And if you can't prove that you are technical, you're going to lose the ear of the technical people. So you have to be able to talk the talk and talk the jargon that they do. So what I would encourage is to learn it. Okay, like especially on the AppSec side, which is mostly my world. Learn how to code. If you're an AppSec engineer, learn how to code so you can talk to other engineers about how to code, and you'll get that reputation and sort of clout that's required to influence. So that's what I would say. Learn the hard stuff.
Yeah.
Take the time, learn the hard stuff. There's no shortcut. And then as far as books, goodness. I do read a lot, especially for this book club.
Yeah. So the last book of the book club.
Yeah, well, we're currently reading this older book called Cyberpunk, which is interesting. I'm not sure that I would necessarily recommend it yet because I'm not into it enough. But so I think I'll throw a few things out there. So I really enjoyed a book called Sandworm, which is about the kind of nation-state Russian hacking group that was prevalent. Had a lot of really good stories about how the cyber world kind of meets the physical world, and how code can actually influence physical objects in terms of.
We had a whole episode of the podcast about that.
Yeah, it was a very. I really enjoyed that book. I've read it twice. I also enjoy Kevin Mitnick's book about social engineering.
Yeah.
What is that one called? The Art of Deception.
Yes.
And it's a little bit older too, but what I like about it is it's almost this like playbook of how to socially engineer somebody.
It's a classic.
If they say this, you say this. If they say this, you say that. So it really dives into kind of the psychological side of how humans tick and how social engineers take advantage of that. So I really enjoyed that book. I also read a lot of, I mentioned this before, but like behavioral science type books, because it helped. Like, the more that I think we can understand how humans work, the better we're able to kind of influence the culture and sort of influence them too. So, like Thinking Fast and Slow is a classic. Daniel Kahneman. That's kind of a foundational book that is referenced in many, many other books as well. So that, I think that is a great one to read. Yeah. Never Split the Difference is a book that I just read recently.
I love this one.
Amazing.
I'm reading it like once a week. I read it up.
Yeah, exactly. The Mom Test. So I kind of go into the entrepreneurial.
Yeah, more product.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The Mom Test is a great one. Yeah, I can go on and on, but those are the ones that come to mind.
Excellent.
Great.
Nice reading list.
Yeah, well, great. Well, thanks a lot. I think we're towards the end of our podcast. It was a great conversation.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot
Yeah,
for
thanks
all
so
the
much.
insights and advice for everyone. I think I'll need put a couple of links, below the episode so people can also access it, and especially for the guide so they can implement it. Or try people who haven't yet implemented it in their organization can try to do it, on their own, and potentially motivate and inspire others.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. You asked good questions. So it was definitely a pleasure. And yeah, I'm happy to help just in general. If folks have questions or think about camping programs and so on, feel free to reach out. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Great. Thanks a lot.